So the Miami Heat have been one of my favorite teams to watch the past couple of years because of Erik Spoelstra's coaching and the toughness of the team and all that. And when I look at the team right now, I feel like they're kind of in a weird spot where they could decide to just go all out with the youth and play Josh Richardson. Well, in terms of minutes, he's played about as many as you would expect, but you give more of the offense to him. You play Bam Adebayo more than Kelly Olynyk and Hassan Whiteside. You play Justice Winslow more than, let's say, James Johnson. You've got Rodney McGruder lingering on the wing as well. Dwayne Wade, as of now, is not on this roster. There's just a whole lot of things the Heat could do, right? Like, they could play all their veterans and they could just go all out for 45, 46 wins, or they could look to build towards the future a little bit more. Now, I would expect they're going to want to do the in-between of those two things, which is try to win and then also give the young dudes as many opportunities as possible, which you could argue is maybe or maybe not the right decision. But I think it's a pretty interesting roster overall. I think the first thing you got to look at is just Hassan Whiteside. I don't want to take too long on him because you already know what I'm going to say, like kills spacing, they were better with Olynyk and all that. Is there a chance Bam Adebayo is already better than Whiteside? I mean, he's probably already better than the playoff Whiteside, but we've seen Hassan at his best still be one of the maybe slightly above mid-tier centers in the NBA. However, Bam perhaps fits in more to today's league in terms of like switching onto perimeter players and doesn't have as much of an ego and attitude towards playing a certain amount of minutes. At least he doesn't right now. We fast forward a few years, maybe he does, but as of right now, that doesn't seem to be the case with Bam. So while I expect that Whiteside gets the chance to start the season, I wouldn't be surprised if him and Bam are playing about the same amount of minutes as the year goes along, and then potentially Bam even playing over him if it proves that he's the better defender, better energy guy, better screen setter, roller to the basket, all that stuff. And then from there, is Whiteside tradable? I mean, his contract doesn't have too much length on it, so you got that going for you, but at the same time, him as a player and his paycheck is pretty steep. He's making over $25 million, so I don't know. He probably accepts the player option after this year, so he might just be a guy who's just on this team, and it's kind of like a sore spot, but there's nothing much you can really do about it. If we can go on from Bam to Josh Richardson, Richardson may end up being the best offensive young dude they have because with Winslow, it's mainly going to be on defense. Same thing with Bam. Same thing with, McGruder isn't even that young. He's like 27. But Richardson, while his offensive game is not always the prettiest, there's a lot of herky-jerkiness to it, and his ball handling and burst definitely need to improve. But his percentages are good, and he just seems to find a way to make shots, right? Whether they're contested shots, open ones, he flows well within Spoelstra's offense. Is there a chance that he goes up from his 13 points a game to like 17 or 18 this season? I mean, potentially. His usage rate has gone up every year, and he just seems to be on this trajectory where he just gets better every season. I mean, efficiency, the win shares, and value of a replacement player, like, he's just made Miami a little better every season. So perhaps he takes another jump. Maybe he's just this pretty solid two-way guy who puts up 13 a game. I don't know, but I would encourage Miami to play him as many minutes as possible. Now, could that interfere with Dion Waiters? I mean, maybe. I would guess that both of these guys can play like both wing positions, and in the case of Dion, maybe even play point guard sometimes in a pinch. We saw Dion play pretty damn well in that one run with the Heat that we all remember so well. However, outside of that, I mean, he is what he is. If his three-pointers are going to go in more often, then that's great. But if I had to take a guess, I think I feel better about Josh Richardson than I do Dion Waiters at this point. But I do believe that Spoelstra can make it work enough with those two where they get the ball enough and Dion isn't just going to be sitting in the corner doing nothing. I mean, Spoelstra's got so many plays where like every guy will end up touching the ball on a possession, so I think he can figure it out enough. And you can mix in Dragic and Tyler Johnson enough to make it all work. But if we can keep on sticking with the young dudes, I guess if you look at Justice Winslow now, I think it's safe to say after 3 seasons that while the jump shot from a percentage standpoint has gotten better, I mean, he shot 38%. He only took 2 a game, but that is definitely improvement. It's safe to say, like, his ceiling is probably Andre Iguodala, which is still quite a ceiling if you ask me, because, I mean, the offensive game for Winslow, it kind of is what it is at this point. And then he's shown enough signs as a playmaker, as a ball handler, and then the defense is legit. So I would like to see them play him over like James Johnson moving forward. I mean, I love James Johnson. He's been a great role player for this Heat team for a while, but at a certain point, I think you have to recognize, number one, Winslow may end up being a little better than Johnson moving forward since, you know, Johnson's starting to get up there in age a bit. And if this is the guy in Winslow who you believe is going to lead you in the next regime of the Miami Heat, then, well, you don't want James Johnson to be holding that up. One problem Miami has is a lot of these guys are not really tradable. James Johnson is making $16 million in 2021. Whiteside's contract I've talked about, Tyler Johnson making $19 million next year, so a lot of it just has to be shuffling of the rotations, and Spoelstra has to figure out all that stuff. Is it possible that they could make some sort of move? I mean, I guess, but my bet would have to be, like, if you're going to see any cutting salary moves from this team, it's going to be, like, Whiteside getting bought out next season or something. And even then, I could picture them just sticking it out for one more season to get his money completely off the books. Now, what helps them is they have most of their draft picks moving forward. In 2021, they owe a pick to the Sixers. But the next 2 seasons, at least, it would actually reward them to potentially lose a few more games for the sake of the young guys. But I also have a feeling that this front office doesn't really want to do that. But again, because there's not any, like, glaring, this guy has to play besides Whiteside at center, I think you can work in all these young dudes enough. And then from there, it's just a matter of seeing, like, maybe Bam becomes the next Clint Capella. Maybe Justice Winslow ends up being one of the best two-way players in the league. Maybe Josh Richardson takes a pretty big leap on offense. Perhaps second half of the season, Dion Waiters is the actual Dion Waiters. I don't know. I mean, his 30 games that he was healthy this season were not exactly that good. And this is the Heat for you. It's just a hodgepodge of veterans and young dudes who are not really that young anymore, on top of just a lot of competing for minutes. And luckily for them, they've got a hell of an owner, or whatever the hell Pat Riley's role is, president of basketball operations. And then they got one of the best coaches in the league. So they'll probably still be about a mid-40s win team. And I would suspect that some of these young guys will show some good signs. And then Whiteside will either bounce back or potentially be out of the rotation. It should be an okay enough season for Miami.